Hey y'all, Rabbid here, and if I've learned one thing from my time on the internet, it'll be that no idea is ever truly original. You might think you've thought up something really intelligent, but the likelihood is that someone else has already had that idea. So, above all else, just try and enjoy yourselves. And play Star Tropics. The other lesson I've learned from the internet is that you can't copyright an idea until you do exactly that, and then it's only illegal if someone cares enough to enforce it. Especially in my line of work, you've got no chance of any kind of unique thought or idea making it onto the internet without half a dozen imitations. Video games are no different, and for every icon there's about a dozen other, slightly less successful games that didn't try very hard to hide where their influences came from. It's the sincerest form of flattery, don't you know? So the entertainment comes from how far a game goes in pursuit of copying an idea almost one for one. Because there are games that were merely influenced by another more popular game and you can see a lot of similarities in there, but I think it's way more fascinating to see the many ways in which components from one game have been virtually translated onto a setting that doesn't even try to be different. For the record, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with ripping off a game as long as the rip-off does anything to set itself apart from its inspiration. Copyright is a strange thing, and it's something that only seems to be abused in the wrong direction on YouTube and nowhere else. Unless you're Nintendo or Disney and you feast on the souls of the less fortunate. I mean, they are pretty delicious. When you look back on nearly 50 years of games nicking ideas from each other and influential titles sticking their heads above the parapet so that they can be used as a template for other titles, I don't think you can overstate how important Grand Theft Auto 3 is. Yeah, sure, it did a lot of work for its own franchise and demonstrated the ease with which a series can be converted into 3 dimensions, but GTA 3 was so popular among gamers of all backgrounds that it quickly became the go-to game to copy if you wanted to make a similarly huge amount of money. It's been 18 years and we're still balls deep in open world action adventure games that let you drive around a large overworld to complete objectives in whatever order you like. I'm not saying that Saints Row opened the floodgates for all these other games to come into the picture and try to steal GTA's thunder, but I don't think it helped. And actually, Saints Row isn't even all that close to Grand Theft Auto, or at least it isn't nowadays. The first Saints Row game tried to work in a few interesting ideas like character customization and the respect meter as a sign of how you're getting on with other gangs in the game, but it's very hard to play this game without being reminded of GTA at every other turn. However, I don't think this is a bad thing at all because it came out a good 5 years after GTA 3, and while it does lean a bit heavily on a lot of the good things in that game, it does do a pretty good job of introducing new components on top of that framework. It is a blatant ripoff, but only really on the surface level. I could show you some footage and you might think, yeah, this is basically the same game. But it also made a lot of small improvements across the board, and I think that should be recognized. Not enough to not be a ripoff though, but I don't think anyone cared enough about that at the time. You want to play gang-orientated Grand Theft Auto? Sure, sounds like fun. Saints Row was criticised for a while when it first came out for being too similar to GTA, but give it its credit, it did eventually morph into its own completely different thing. You look at the likes of Saints Row 3, 4, and whatever Gat Out of Hell's supposed to be, and they are a lot different. They've changed a lot. They had us in the first half, not gonna lie. Do you know why Super Smash Bros. Has worked so well for the best part of 2 decades? Well, there's lots of different reasons that all seem to lead back to bringing together an ensemble cast of iconic characters so everyone can have someone to recognize and play as, and ultimately say, hey, ain't it wacky that you've got a game that has Cloud, King K. Rool, Joker, and Banjo in it? Isn't it fucking crazy that this game exists? Yeah, it is, but I think it's even crazier that Sony tried their hardest to rip this concept off and came up embarrassingly short. It's not like it's a difficult idea to recycle. Fill a game with as many gaming icons as you have the rights to and have them beat the shit out of each other. Don't tell me that that wouldn't just explode into a torrent of money. I'd call you a fool and a liar, sir. PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale is still a game that annoys me quite a lot, and not because it tried to copy Smash Bros, but because it didn't really commit enough to that idea to also copy the fun. And it looks a bit like Smash Bros from a far enough distance, but you get close up and it is so far away from the game we know and love. And honestly, I do wish it was closer. It's important to remember that not every ensemble fighting game is derivative of Smash Bros. It might have been the franchise that helped to popularize this particular type of fighting game, but I think you'd be stretching things a bit far by saying that games like Jump Force or even Mortal Kombat are rip-offs of Smash Bros. PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale is such a half-assed attempt at making Sony Smash Bros, and nowhere is this exemplified more than the character roster. It's great that there's a game out there where Dead Space's Isaac Clarke can fight Parappa the Rapper, but it is unbelievably infuriating that Sony didn't tap into their far more iconic well of characters like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. The inclusion of Raiden almost acts as a resignation that they couldn't get Solid Snake since he was chilling out with much bigger names in Smash Bros. Brawl, and it feels like the perfect allegory for how much of a sub-tier fighting game this is. It isn't even a Battle Royale game, it's in the fucking title, it's not, you're not against a bunch of other people, it's really sad. There's no plans for a sequel, which is maybe the most tragic part of all of this, because a properly planned ensemble fighting game with the best characters that Sony have to offer is a fucking outstanding concept. Goes to show how much of a wasted opportunity this game was. I just want Lara Croft to fight Nathan Drake, is that too much to ask? With some of the more obvious rip-offs out there, I always wonder if more couldn't have been done to cut some pretty blatant ties to other games out there. This is where it'd be really helpful to get inside the mind of whoever made these games to work out if it was intentional or not. Because if it wasn't, you could have tried a lot harder. It's only at this point of the video that I realise that I think I'm ranking these games on how blatant the rip-offs are rather than anything more intricate than that. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to the spectacularly stupid world of Minecraft rip-offs, which has been very helpfully listed on my favourite website, thetop10s.com. You've got usual suspects like Terraria, and then less known examples like Fortnite, Ocarina of Time, Super Mario Bros, and a Bedlington Terrier. As in the actual breed of dog. I told you this website was good. Minecraft is a weird game to have rip-offs of though, because when it came out in 2009, it quickly set about having a huge influence on the gaming market, and seemed to convince every developer that their game needed crafting mechanics even though most of them didn't. So there's a lot of games like Minecraft, but saying that they're rip-offs is generally a bit of a stretch. Right up until something like Total Miner Forge comes along and changes everything. This is an easy game to describe because Total Miner Forge doesn't try very hard at all to sever some very unmistakable ties to everyone's favourite crafty miney game. You knock cubes of trees down to give you wood that then lets you craft a bunch of other way crazier shit, most of which seems to follow a very similar recipe to a lot of things in Minecraft. It pretty much is Minecraft, but with a zoomed in POV and a general lack of refinement that Minecraft went through for years before its official release. But hey, it isn't so bad, since it ended up on the Xbox before Minecraft did, and even came with this weird official trailer with Inception music playing over the top of it. Which, unsurprisingly, doesn't do a lot to make Total Miner look like the life-changing experience that I think they were going for. Either way, one of the head developers jumped ship earlier this year, having run a fairly popular game into the ground over the course of many years, and Total Miner is now not being officially supported by its own dev team. So not only did it rip off the aesthetic and basic gameplay of Minecraft, it also ripped off the shitty creator leaving their game for other things. The difference is Minecraft is currently owned by Microsoft, is still being played by a lot of players, and was actually created by Hatsune Miku, so who the fuck knows? It's the little differences that make a big difference in the end. The 1980s were an absolute bloodbath for video game rip-offs. The resurgence of the gaming industry led to a whole host of companies and developers regaining confidence in their own decisions, even if some of those decisions were to copy and paste a rival's game into a slightly different setting. There's an arrogance to that which I can very nearly, sort of not really admire for slapping down a near carbon copy of another game and claiming it as your own. You might have been enjoying the first Legend of Zelda game with a happy smile on your face, but maybe you would have gotten a similar level of satisfaction if you played sleeper hit Golden Axe Warrior instead. Who knows, but I do know that Super Mario Bros. Is one of the most important games of all time, and I can't think of any game that would be more likely to be ripped off. but damn, they didn't even try. The Great Gianna Sisters is such a wonderfully 80s thing. Even if it didn't have anything to do with Super Mario Bros., I look at the box and the art and the big hair and the fact that Gianna was misspelled with only one N here, so they changed the official spelling so they wouldn't have to reprint a ton of boxes. It's just so of its era, and I kinda love it. Delving deeper into the actual game though, it quickly becomes very apparent that the Great Gianna Sisters has a very close association with everyone's favourite 2D platformer from 1985. To the point where the first part of the first level in the game is so damn close to 1-1 from Super Mario Bros. That it does kind of set the tone for what kind of game this is, really. I don't need to convince you that this game stole a lot of ideas from Super Mario Bros. Because the reason that the Great Gianna Sisters was taken off sale was because of quote-unquote legal pressure from Nintendo without there being any official lawsuit. And I can understand that. This game has this weird moment where it tells viewers to subscribe to RabbidLuigi's YouTube channel and to click bells that do things, and fuck! That's my thing! Get your own thing, come on! For this reason, the Great Gianna Sisters quickly vanished from stores worldwide, which has made it quite the collector's item these days. And yet, it's since received a number of sequels, including Gianna Sisters Twisted Dreams in 2012 that came from a Kickstarter campaign, set up by Black Forest Games, the same psychopaths who revived Bubsy a couple of years ago. I've connected Bubsy to Mario through a convoluted series of connections. Can I have a streamy now? The typical route for rip-offs to go down is for one game to borrow ideas from another but fall short of implementing them in a way that either replicates or even surpasses the original. That's usually what makes a game a rip-off instead of anything more complicated than that, since you'd imagine that if any game was ever able to usurp the game it was copying, there would be some weird quantum entanglement in the space-time continuum where the rip-off is actually the better and therefore more important video game? You honestly think that Angry Birds was a unique concept and no game before it had the idea of slinging objects at a structure that collapsed using a physics engine? That's bananas, and you know it! What you might not know is that one of the first ever video games was a rip-off. Explain that one, atheists! You'd struggle to find a game that's older than Pong. In fact, if you ask most people what the first game ever made was, if the answer isn't Fortnite and you slowly return to the Earth as a collection of deteriorating atoms, you might live long enough for them to probably say Pong. It came out in 1972, which is as early on as a lot of people can imagine when it comes to video game history. And it's certainly the most important game from that period of time since it demonstrated that an electronic game could be commercially successful and that, hey, there's a market for this kind of shit. Yeah, it's simple, but that just means that it's really easy for anyone to understand, which is part of the reason why it was so popular. But it's hardly an original idea, and I'm not talking about table tennis being a game that's been played for over a century. The nutty thing is that Pong itself is a rip-off of a game called Table Tennis for the Magnavox Odyssey. Something that is very easy to prove since table tennis came out first and these games look virtually identical. The story goes that table tennis was the result of 6 years of work and research from developer Ralph Baer that culminated in the production of the first gaming console, the Magnavox Odyssey, which was then taken on a countrywide tour along with table tennis and a host of other games. Somewhere in the audience was Nolan Bushnell, who saw table tennis and decided that this was where the money was and threw together a very similar game for Atari called Pong. I don't need to tell you what happened next, since one game is recognized the world over and the other looks like the rip-off. Which is some tragic irony if I've ever seen it. This is RabbidLuigi, and you're probably thinking, hey, why didn't the lawyers get involved so you can get some money out of it? And they did. Problem is that Bayer only settled for a one-time licensing fee instead of anything like royalties or a cease and desist. Basically meant that Atari could use Pong to print money for decades, and they did. What we should be learning from this is that you should copyright your best ideas, and failing that, just hire the best lawyers in the world and sue the fuck out of everybody. My advice isn't getting any better, is it? Have you got a topic that you'd like me to talk about next week? Make sure you leave a comment about that down below because I'll be taking the most interesting suggestions and making a poll on the next video. In fact, here's one right now that I prepared from last week. I'll be revealing the winner of the poll on Twitter and taking suggestions for games to talk about that are related to that topic. So feel free to follow me over there so we can keep in touch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.